This is She Creates Business, a podcast for wedding pros. Your host, Kinsey Roberts, interviews incredible women in the wedding industry who are making their mark and creating success on their terms. Join the conversation.
Well, hey there and happy Thursday. Welcome to episode 64 of She Creates Business, a podcast for wedding pros. You guys, today's episode is just a beast of information in such a good way. My guest today is Kristin Kaplan. She's been on the show before, but never as a soloist, as they would say. And I'm so thrilled to have her here. She is just a complete guru. My word, not hers. I really feel this way. She's just a complete guru when it comes to pricing your wedding business so that you are actually covering those expenses that you need to cover, those fixed costs, those variable costs, your actual salary, taxes, all of these things that we might not want to think about, I've heard from a lot of wedding professionals who are even veterans in the industry who don't really take this stuff seriously in their business because they're just worried about, the creative and the pretty and the thing that they're really excellent at, which is, planning weddings and being organized and flowers and, doing the calligraphy. But this stuff is so important, you guys. It will radically transform the way you think of your business if you put these things in place. So today, Kristin's here to tell us more about pricing and to give us, just a huge deep dive into how we can price our business for profit and how we can pay ourselves a salary, how we can answer that really hard question when clients tell us we're too expensive, and so much more. So let me tell you a little bit more about Kristin. If you're interested in learning more about her personal story and her business story, I'd love for you to go back to the 2 episodes that I did with her and her biz bestie, Ginny Krause. I'll put those links in the show notes. But today we just jump right into pricing. So Kristin is an entrepreneur, a wife, mother of 3, and an extreme list maker. A northerner by way of Los Angeles, she is now happily settled in Nashville, Tennessee, and loves everything about living in Music City. She founded Stunning Events, her wedding planning company, 10 years ago, where she plans fresh, fun wedding celebrations and manages all business operations. She also teaches, mentors, and coaches creative entrepreneurs to live a life of purpose by building a solid business foundation. She is the writer and creator of the Pricing Workbook, a pricing guide for creative business owners, and the co-founder, along with Ginny Krause, of the Wedding Business Bosses Community and the Wedding Business Academy, a 6-month group coaching program for wedding industry creatives. We talked a lot about the Wedding Business Academy, and I mentioned the Wedding Business Bosses group all the time on this show. So if you're not part of that Facebook group, head over there and join us. It's so much fun. I'll put all of those links in the show notes. But without further ado, let's go to the show. Kristin Kaplan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming back. I'm so glad you said yes. I was, you're my pricing lady. So I was like, hopefully she says yes to coming back on.
Yeah, I love to talk about pricing.
I do. You guys, if you are new to the show, we had Kristin back on in a couple episodes in the past with her biz bestie, Ginny Krause. So we're not going to go too much into her personal story today because we talked about it a lot in those past episodes because I really want to use this time to talk about pricing, period. So if you are interested in that, it's an awesome story. She has so much experience in the industry. Head back to those episodes. I'll put those links in the show notes. But today we are going to chat about pricing. So my first question, Kristin, really is, when in your career did this become a passion of yours? Because I feel like that's what it is.
Yes. It really was quite a while ago. I actually remember once a planner. This was probably, I was probably only a few years into my career as a planner, and another planner had emailed me or said something, and I had noticed that her pricing was she was charging $300 for day of coordination or something. Oh my. And for some reason I took it upon myself, looking back, it was a little brazen of me, but I was like, hey, I don't think you're making any money at that price. And I wrote her this whole email that was explaining how she needed to be thinking about this and doing the math and all of this. And It was totally unsolicited. And I don't know if she thought that was helpful or rude, but I was just trying to help. And I was like, I really want you to make money and succeed at this. So here are my thoughts. And so I've always kind of been weirdly obsessed with it. And then once I, several years ago, just started kind of ranting about it or a couple years ago on Periscope, then I realized that a lot of people really wanted to talk about it.
They do. And in your Facebook group, the Wedding Business Bosses, I feel like it's a topic all the time. Like,
Yeah.
how do you guys charge? Or do you feel like I'm charging correctly? Or how did you figure out your pricing? I mean, the questions like run the gamut. And it's even, I even see it in that group and all over, like with seasoned wedding professionals and with brand new people. Like, I don't feel like anyone has it figured out.
No, and that's kind of what I noticed.
Scary.
I know. It's like the whole industry I felt like was undercharging, because I would look at, I knew what I was charging, and it was definitely on the higher end for services. And so I'm sitting there and I know what I'm making, and it's not like I'm rolling in money. So I'm sitting here going, is everyone in our industry just not making money? I feel like this needs to be talked about and addressed so that we can all help each other do better.
Yes. So you mentioned that a couple years ago you started really just like going to town with this information on Periscope. What did you start talking about, and how did you approach the topic?
I remember I did a few ones that people really responded to. I think one in particular was, what to do when a client tells you you're too expensive. Because I feel like even though we're not making a lot of money, somehow we always get that pushback. And so I know that one was a big one. And then just really, I kind of just started opening up that dialogue about like, if you're not making money, why are you doing this? Like at some point, we should not be afraid to make money doing what we love. Just because we love our jobs and we're passionate about it doesn't mean, we have to be the whole starving artist syndrome. Like that doesn't have to be a thing. So I think once I really started saying that and people were going, yes, that's true. Why am I doing this if I'm not making any money? Then it allowed everyone to start kind of opening their eyes and pulling their heads out of the sand a little bit and, feeling a little more empowered to charge what they were actually worth.
Yes. Okay, I have two questions. I want to come back to what the answer is to when a client tells you you're too expensive. But really quickly, I wonder, with all of the women that you've worked with, have you found any similarities to their background, like their work background prior to coming into the wedding industry?
I see a lot. I think we have a lot of working professionals that sort of had that creative itch to do something a little bit different. And that's why they end up in weddings is most of the women I work with, they're all very organized. They really run great businesses in a lot of ways. But the piece that they're often missing is sort of, they're really great like wedding planners. And that's predominantly who I work with, but they don't take that time to sort of plan out their businesses. So it's almost like they've got that working background, but there's some sort of business marketing piece that's missing. And that's where, everyone kind of gets stuck in this rut of, okay, I'm doing work, but I'm not really making a living at it. So how do we fix that piece?
Yeah. And I asked that because I see the same thing. And I used to work in real estate. And so like sales, that's the game, right? Like that's what you do. So I'm never afraid to tell people what my prices are. And when one of the things we were trained on, like in the last company I worked for, was when someone just says, well, you're really expensive, or you're really expensive, or like your prices are too high. The answer is always, compared to what? Like, what have you been,
answer.
like, oh, not in a mean way, but just like, oh, compared to what? What do you mean by that? Like, what are you basing your, like the people down the street, or what is it?
Right. Like, where do you,
like just, and
that's usually what they're saying is it's too expensive for me.
For
and it's
me.
Like, okay, well, that's a different conversation.
That's exactly right. And then they get that. They kind of answer their own question like, oh, I guess you're not that expensive. Like, I just can't afford you.
Yeah, exactly. That's the real problem.
Interesting. Okay. So let's go back to
yes.
What do you say when a client says you're too expensive? Because we get that all the time.
I think there's a lot of pushback from couples. And I get it. Weddings are expensive. They are more expensive than I think anyone is ever really prepared to spend on one day. And then people get into the planning world and they're like, oh my gosh, I was not expecting that I was gonna have to spend this much to get married. Yeah. And so when we get that pushback, there's obviously an issue of value going on here. What they're not understanding is the value that they're getting at the end of the day and what they're actually paying for. I think we have a tendency to sit there and say, here's the list of things you're getting. If you're a photographer, you're sitting there going, you're getting 8 hours of service and you're getting an album and you're getting this and you're getting this piece. But at the end of the day, that's not what you're selling. You're selling memories. You're selling, if you're a photographer, as a planner, you're selling peace of mind so they can have a stress-free day. And so that's often where the disconnect is happening when someone's going, oh, you're too expensive. You're not getting them to understand what they're really buying from you. And then the other piece of it is you're not standing out as unique to them. So they might be comparing you to 6 other vendors that were lower priced than you are. So you've got to have something about yourself and your business that allows you to say, well, you can't get this with anybody else. And this is what's unique to me. And this is what you're going to get with me. And that piece, that uniqueness is really what's going to make it so that you're not too expensive for anyone. Because if someone wants you bad enough because they can't get you anywhere else, they'll pay for it.
Yes.
People will just
They will. And I mean, I think like Amazon is a perfect, like I could run down to Target, but I order everything from Amazon because it'll be here in 2 days and I can sit in my yoga pants.
Exactly.
Like they sell convenience, right? It's not like they're the best or they have the best product, but they sell convenience.
Yeah. And you know, you're paying a few dollars more to get that same thing at Amazon than you would at Target. So it's like, but you sort of just look past that because you're like, I can stay in my yoga pants and save the time.
100%. Yeah. I go to Amazon for the convenience, not because I'm like, oh, I'm so proud of like what they're doing in the world.
No.
So you're not standing out as unique and you're also not selling the value. Okay, I want to talk about this because I feel like this gets confused when people are like, well, what are you worth? Like, charge what you're worth. And I feel like that is like a misnomer because like you're worth more than your $10,000 photography package. You just are, like you personally. And honestly, I think a lot of our target markets are going to like fall in that millennial gap, you know, because that's who's getting married and their threshold for sales is so low. And it's not like, well, you're going to get this handy linen album. They don't care. You know, they just don't, honestly. And so when we say like, you're not selling the value, so how can people position that? Like the convenience of a wedding planner, the peace of mind, the memories, how can they position that so that it actually resonates with their clients?
I think you really have to paint the picture. And that's something I really worked hard on in my sales process for a long time, especially with millennials. Like they are one of the savviest group of buyers out there right now. Like they really do their homework in a way that people in the past didn't necessarily do that. So you have to be, first of all, be prepared to paint that picture and really walk them through, this is everything that you're getting. And something I do is, you know, I'll walk them through the whole journey of planning and kind of say, this is how this process starts. Let me explain the whole experience to you from beginning to end and make them feel like they're there and make them see all the different touch points that are going to happen along the way. Like I'm going to be doing this for you. And then this is going to happen. And then we're going to have an amazing tasting with your caterers. And then we're going to follow up on this. And then, you know, take them all the way through the wedding day so that by the end of it, they really are saying to themselves like, yes, I want all that you just described to me. And I want to be that, you know, bride or groom in the situation that you just described to me. And then they really start to put the pieces together of why they need to have you or why you are so important. And that's also why there has to be some element of what you're offering that is a little bit unique or that stands out. And maybe it's just your style or the way that you do things. I tend to be a planner that I am not a beat around the bush kind of person in really anything I do.
Yes.
And I tell that to my brides. I'm like, if you are looking for a planner who's going to be a yes woman, I am not for you. But if you're looking for someone that's going to flat out tell you when something is out of your budget or that is not going to work or that's going to look terrible, I'm really good at that. So, and when you say that kind of stuff or when you find out what those pieces about you that are unique and you're able to explain them well and communicate them, the right clients will click with you and they will want to have you at the end of the day. And the price will not matter anymore. It won't be such a commodity.
It won't be such a commodity. I love that. So your pricing workbook, which is fabulous. You guys can find it at thepricingworkbook.com. Yes, there's information about value and your uniqueness in there, but there's also logistical spreadsheets like you know, and I love that. Like, here is how you charge. Here's what you need to do. Could you, without like giving away the farm, could you kind of walk us through that and just help people understand how they should be pricing their services?
Yes. And so the pricing workbook goes into a lot more detail about it, but essentially I found out people were missing a lot of pieces. I had found a lot of people were, covering their business costs, but then they weren't paying themselves a salary or, they weren't covering all the aspects that go into what you need to charge for in a business. And kind of the main four are you need to obviously cover your fixed costs, which are your business expenses. You need to cover your variable costs, which are kind of your cost per wedding or cost per client. So those are going to change depending on how many weddings you have, things like your labor or your assistants, parking costs on wedding days, things like that. You have to cover your salary and you get to decide what that is. I think people are always very surprised that I have that answer because they just think of it as like, oh, whatever I make on top, I'll just keep as my salary. And even if it's $10,000 a year, oh, well, like, no, you should be pricing yourself with the end result of your salary in mind. And if you want to make $80,000 a year, price yourself that way. Like you got to think about that and factor that in. And that number is going to depend on a lot of factors. Obviously, someone brand new to business is not going to be able to make what someone 20 years in is. And obviously, depending on your location, cost of living is different. So, planners in New York or LA are going to have different salary requirements than, say, me here in Nashville. So there's a lot of factors that go into determining what your number and your salary is, but you've got to make sure you're considering that when you're putting all the pieces together. And then finally, you want to make a little bit extra on top of that, first of all, to cover taxes, because we all have to pay those. And I feel like people always forget about that.
Yes.
And I've seen several businesses get stuck where suddenly they find out they owe it a lot more than they thought they were going to, and they don't have that money anywhere because they didn't account for it. And then you should have a little leftover in profit as well, because you want your business to grow and you want to be able to have some extra money at the end of the year to be able to reinvest and say, like, okay, so now if I want to add additional revenue streams or add a team member or go to a conference and learn something new, I've got new money now that I can reinvest in my business to make it better and grow it further. So those are kind of the 4 areas that you need to be accounting for when you are determining what you're going to charge.
Yes. And so when you talk about fixed costs, if it's someone who is just, let's talk about 2 types of people. So let's talk about someone who's just starting their business. What are like 2 or 3 fixed costs that they need to 100% put in that category?
If you're just starting, some of the earlier ones are going to be insurance. You need to have general liability insurance if you're an industry vendor. I feel like people just kind of skip that one or decide I'm going to do that in a few years when I've gotten going. Well, sometimes when accidents or things happen, they don't discriminate based on how many years you've been in business. So insurance would be an example of that. Any office supplies or tools that you use to run your business would be a fixed cost as well. If you're a little more advanced, you might have a studio space or an office space. That would be considered a fixed cost. You might have additional team members at that point in time. Those would be fixed costs as well. So it's obviously going to grow. And that's, again, why people that are newer are definitely going to be charging less than people that have been doing this for 10 or 20 years. But at the same time, I'm a very big proponent of the idea that everyone should still be making money, though. Just because you're brand new doesn't mean that you should be doing this for free.
That's right. Oh, that's so true. Now, I know, and again, like, I'll make the disclaimer, Kristin is not a CPA. She's also not an accountant. You need to contact someone.
Contact those individuals.
Contact those individuals who are professionals. But when we say, like, take money out for taxes and everything, like, just basic bare bones, how do you kind of, like, help your clients navigate those waters? Like, do you just send them off to a CPA, or are you kind of like, hey, save a percentage?
I usually tell people, it's obviously, again, like the disclaimer, definitely talk to a CPA to get exact numbers. But, typically if you're putting aside 20 to 30% of your income in an account somewhere for taxes, then you're going to be fine. You'll probably have some left over at the end of the year anyway. So that's kind of that's always what I would do. And I never had an issue. I would always put about 25 to 30%. And I always advocate too for like a separate account at a separate bank if possible. So you're not tempted to like dip into that money for any reason. You immediately just, at the end of each month or end of each quarter, however you want to do it, take that chunk of money, move it to a bank where you can't see it and just leave it there and don't touch it. And then tax time comes around, you'll be fine. Also, there are things like estimated taxes as business owners, which you should talk to your CPA about. So you're not paying like lump sums at the end of the year. But this is, as small businesses, people just don't think about this when they first start out. They just like run for the hills and go for it. And then they're like, oh, yeah, we have to pay taxes as a business. Right.
I wonder, when you're pricing yourself, okay, so we talked about these big 4. How do you feel? And I know that you said, like, when you like position your value and you have like uniqueness about you, then price isn't as much of a commodity. But I think there's something to be said for competition in your area. And I think that there are price shoppers out there. So how do you factor in competition when you're pricing your business, or do you?
I feel like you have to factor it in a little bit. And it's important to do market research when you're first starting your business and looking at what other people are charging. But I do feel like we also have to be careful because there's so many people in this industry that aren't making money. And you can't start basing your pricing strategy on an entire market that's not making money. At the end of the day, those competitors are not going to stay in business. I used to worry about them a lot, like the price, the ones that are undercutting everybody else. And I always found that, you can't maintain that price. You're not going to make any money. And there's only so long people are going to work without making money. So those people would eventually, go by the wayside and disappear. So I wouldn't get too stressed out about those undercutters in the market. But I also think this is also why education's great and coming together as an industry is great and all talking about it is great, because then we can all work together to say, it's not like we're price gouging or something, but just saying like, hey, how about we all make sure that we're at least charging enough to make money so that, people are not always feeling like they have to discount or do something else to compete. Because that's just it's just not a good road to go down, and it's not going to help your business at the end of the day. So it's good to know what other people are charging, but don't base your pricing on that, because there is a good chance a lot of people are not making money, and then you're just basing your pricing on an already failing business model.
You don't know what's going on in their bank account.
Nope, you have no idea. And there's a lot of people that make it look on social media like they have tons of clients and making so much money, and in reality, they're not. And I know people that would discount and do stuff. So you might look on social media and be like, oh, well, I know they charge $5,000 and they seem to be booked all the time. How do you know they're not giving discounts behind everyone, like just to get the client and just to book them? Maybe they're actually selling their packages for $2,000. You have no idea. So don't get so caught up in what everybody else is doing. You really need to go back to, if you're going to make this work as a business and you want to be in the game long term, you're going to have to charge enough money to make sure that happens.
Yes. Okay. So when you, let's talk about raising your prices.
Yes.
Now, we talked about when you're newer, of course, you're still, like Kristin is an advocate. She already said, if you have just started your business, maybe you're 2-3 years in, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be making money. I don't really feel like years equals salary, because you could be just a straight BA wedding planner, and you deserve what you deserve a great salary. But let's talk about raising your prices, because I think we can all, even 3 years in, 10 years in, there's room to grow financially. So how do you navigate those waters with your clients and with communicating that to, especially if you get referrals and like, hey, my friend Sally only paid you $5,000. Why am I having to pay you $7,500? Whatever, those kinds of discussions.
Yes. I find it's easier for most people to kind of raise their prices a little at a time. And especially when I kind of first put out the first version of the pricing workbook, and a lot of people sort of freak out and were like, whoa, and because people were not really paying attention to how much money they were making. And so suddenly when you really did all the math, I think it scared a lot of people. And when they saw how high they'd have to raise their prices to make the kind of money they wanted to make, they were a little shocked. But that's where I don't think you have to suddenly triple your prices overnight. For some people, it's more comfortable to do it a little at a time. And if you have a large jump that you think you need to make, I always say just do, as long as you commit to this strategy of, say for the next 3 weddings, I'm going to, charge $500 more. And then once I book 3 weddings, I'm going to add another $500 to my price. People tend to get scared though, and then they're like, well, maybe I'll just book 4 or 5 before I do that. They start to hold back and not want to do it because they're petrified.
Maybe I'll just do 10. That's fine.
Yeah, exactly. They just sort of hold on for a really long time. So if you can commit to saying every 3 weddings, I'm going to add, X amount of dollars to my price, it makes it not feel so bad. Because at the end of the day, if someone's seriously not going to book you over a few $100s, that's the make or break, then you're not selling your value. Because everyone who's getting married and most people are having, $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 weddings. And if they're going to sit there and not hire you because of $300 more, there's other issues going on in your business at that point. So that makes it a lot less scary to just do, smaller increases to get to where you need to go. And that way too, it helps, I think, with those referral instances, because, it's very easy to say, well, yes, that, business has changed. And, in the last year since your friend got married. So this is my pricing now. And it is what it is, because we are constantly growing as a business, learning new things and getting better at our craft. And if you have that answer ready to go, you should be good.
I love that. When you, you're very straightforward, which I love, because so am I. And so I feel like whenever you're talking, I'm like, this is exactly what she's thinking. And I really appreciate that. And you carry that over to your clients. So from somebody who is very straightforward, what are maybe 2 tips you could offer to someone who doesn't feel always as confident and forward as we might feel, to just be, very logistical and logical with their clients, these are my prices because I'm better at my craft this year than I was 2 years ago. You're welcome.
Exactly. And I think it comes down to, if you're someone who struggles a little bit with that confidence, one thing I always advise is to rehearse, especially with sales pitches. Rehearse saying your price, rehearse, that unique value sales pitch that you've got, so you can rattle off the top of your head very easily why you charge what you charge. Because yes, sometimes those words don't come very naturally to us. So if you can practice them, write it out, like plan it, and then it's going to become a lot more comfortable in a sales meeting to be able to just say that off the top of your head. Something I always see too a lot with people is they say their price and then they start like backpedaling, like they'll be like,
oh yeah.
But I mean, and then there's like a whole bunch of buts after it. But I mean, like, we have to do this and it's because of this. Just state your price and close your mouth. Like, it's, you don't have to justify it in that way where it comes off desperate and it comes off like you're not confident in it. And so you're having to like add a disclaimer to it. You know your numbers, you've done the math, you know what you need to charge. So you're worth it. And you have to be prepared to deliver that in a way that has confidence behind it. And sometimes a little bit of practice is all it takes.
That's right. Let's talk about closing. How do you close the sale? How do you close the sale? How do you ask for the sale?
I always think, first of all, it's so important. You have to make sure that you have communicated the value before you state your price. This is why I feel like I hate it when, couples, obviously that they need to have an idea of whether they can afford you, because you don't want to waste people's times with sales meetings if they're definitely not going to be able to afford you. So that's where I think putting starting prices out there is great, but don't give away the whole farm until you've had a chance to spell out what the value is and why they should hire you. So once you have gone through that whole thing and you know that they are ready and it seems like a great fit, that's the time where you say, and this is what it costs. You spell out all the details very matter-of-factly, ask if they have any questions. And I always love, there's kind of a follow-up question. And I forget where I learned this, but from somebody many years ago who was in like the sales world, asking them straight up, is there any reason that, you are not ready to move forward? And it basically gives you a chance to field any objections right there. And I know that's a scary question to like flat out ask somebody because you feel like awkward being like, so is there any reason that you're not going to book me? But it allows you to have it because you might be able to offer up a solution. Maybe they tell you, oh, well, the only thing that's kind of standing in our way right now is that you've never worked at our venue. But then you can immediately follow that objection up with, oh, well, you know what? In those cases, I always do a venue walkthrough in advance to familiarize myself with every aspect of that venue, so that prior to us even having our design meeting, I am very comfortable knowing, what can be done there. So automatically you have dealt with that objection right there, right then. So I know that's always a scary question, but I feel like that's a good one in closing. Because then if the pushback is, well, you're just a little more than we were, willing to spend, then you can go right back in with, well, here's why we're worth it, and spell out what those things are that, is why you charge what you charge and why you're good at what you do.
I love it. This reminds me of this old movie from the 80s with like Alec Baldwin, I think, when he's like, ABC, always be closing. And they're like, coffee's for closers. I'm sorry,
like
so
closing
bad.
and sales is hard, but and that's where I just practiced it a lot. And,
I love it.
And I think that's always the big key. And I remember my assistants would sometimes sit in on my sales meetings and, at one point, one of them realized like, wow, you literally say the same stuff, like almost word for word every time. I'm like, yes, because that's how I've said it so many times now that like I can deliver that sales speech over and over and over again. No problem.
And that's what works. Like, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Exactly.
Is there any reason you're not ready to move forward? Because you're not psychic. You don't know what they're thinking. And also, even if you have a really well-crafted sales plan and sales pitch, there's every couple is unique to you.
Right.
And so their objections will be different. And so, what they come, they're either going to say, no, I'm ready to sign, or they're going to say what Kristin said, which is you're a little bit more than we're willing to spend, or you have never been at our venue before, or I have never seen that you have made these kinds of flowers, whatever.
Exactly.
And you have the answer.
Yep. And that's the key. And because you don't want them to walk out that door not telling you that price was the reason when you could have had another chance to, explain why you're worth what you charge. So that's where if you can get them in that sales meeting to tell you and to have a chance to answer that, it's going to, really help you close that sale.
Oh, so brilliant. So in the wedding world, what I've noticed with each person that we interview, like planners, florists, designers, like I own a venue, but a lot of the women I speak with are not like sitting at an office all day. They are, they work from home most of the time, or, they're out doing site visit, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So how do you recommend people who don't have a studio or an office or whatever, what is a great way you've seen them to meet with clients, do that sales meeting so that it feels professional for them, and then they can get used to that and they can, say the same thing every time? What's a good professional way for people to do that?
I always advocate, if you don't have a studio space or an office space, try to find somewhere else that's quiet and professional, like you said. Oftentimes meeting at the venue that they're most interested in, or the venue that they've already chosen, is a great choice because it gives you a chance to show off your knowledge about that space while you're in it. So we would often do that. Or another choice is to just go near, a neighborhood hotel. Hotels have like amazing lobbies that are always very professional and usually very quiet, and it's very easy to just go find a corner or set up a spot where you could just have a conversation. Mm-hmm. I feel like everyone kind of immediately gravitates towards like Starbucks and Panera, which is a horrible choice of a place to have a meeting because it's loud and, there's people talking over you. They're cramped. You want them to be as comfortable as possible. And if you're putting them in an uncomfortable space when you're trying to pitch them and ask them to pay you, it's not going to go very well. So those are always two places: venues, and try to find hotel lobbies that are big and spacious and quiet, that you can sit down and have a professional meeting with somebody.
Brilliant. So, Kristin, as we wrap up here, I should have made this a longer interview because I have like 600 more questions. I feel like we're going to have to do like pricing part 2. Yeah. Okay, good. That's good, because I want to like really dig in. Can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
And I can actually cut this out if you want me to. How long were you in business before you were profitable?
I was in business 1 year before I was profitable, which I think was actually sooner than a lot of people.
Yes.
So the first year I was in business, I was definitely in the red. I spent more money than I made that mm-hmm. year. And it was by the second year in business that I was finally in the black. So I was not making like a salary at that point. I was just making more than I was spending to keep my business afloat. And then it was by my third year that I was actually making a salary.
That you were making a salary.
So that was kind of my progression. But I have seen that the average in business is actually, about 3 years to be making a profit and about 5 years to be making a salary, which scares a lot of people, but it's true. Businesses take a while to build. But for me, I think the only reason it was faster than most is I was also full-time pretty much right from the beginning. When I moved to Nashville, I didn't have a job. So I was like, all right, starting a business, I'm all in. So I was really actually working at my business like 40, 50 hours a week right from the beginning. And I think that made a difference, rather than people that kind of start off as hobbyists or as a side gig and then like slowly work their way over to full time. I think it takes a little bit longer for them to see those profits and see that salary.
I'm so glad you said that, because a lot of people listening do have full-time jobs, which is awesome, and that's okay. But give yourself room to grow and stop saying like, I've been in business for 6 months. Why am I not making 50K?
Yeah, exactly. It takes a while, and especially if you're only working on your business for 5 or 10 hours a week, like you're not gonna suddenly be making $50,000 right off the bat.
That's
so
right.
Give yourself that time.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Okay. So as we wrap up, what if you want someone to take away one thing from this call, what would you say?
I would say probably one of my favorite quotes, which is, if you're not making money in your business, then you don't have a business, you have a hobby. And that is hard to hear, but it's true.
Yes. Yes, it is so true. Where can people find you online, Kristin? First of all, you guys, I just want to mention again, you need to go run, don't walk to get the pricing workbook at thepricingworkbook.com, because I told you that it's not just like overarching, like fancy ideas like, oh, you should be, carving out these 4 things. Like there are spreadsheets in there.
There's formulas and spreadsheets.
Yes. So you can like figure out what is happening in your business. Aside from that, Kristin, where can people find you online? What do you want to tell them about yourself?
They can find me at KristinKaplan.com. That is where I've got, more information about working with me and what I do. I've also now recently launched a YouTube channel, so I've been doing a lot more video content these days. So you can find me over on YouTube as well if you want to hear my ramblings all about pricing all of the time, because that's where I've been doing a lot of my teaching lately, and it's been a lot of fun. So, and also at Kristin C. Kaplan on all the various Instagram and other social media handles as well.
And those will all be in the show notes. Kristin, thank you so very much. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all of this awesome information with us.
Thank you for having me, Kinsey.
My pleasure. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to She Creates Business. Please take a minute and head to iTunes to leave an honest review so we can help more wedding pros find the show.